that school's ranked higher, so I will get more job offers or have a better experience if I go to this school that's ranked really high in the rankings, right? Those rankings don't really sometimes mean a whole lot. I mean, I'm not saying they don't. I'm not poo-pooing them completely, but I also know the way they get those rankings could be money, could be prestige of school leadership. So it doesn't necessarily reflect the experience of the student all of the time. So take it for what it's worth. I wouldn't pick a school solely based on it's ranked in the top 10 CRNA schools. I kind of wish they would just do away with that. Talk to current students from the programs, people. Like, that's the best way. Just like when you go to find a job, for example, don't just go to a hospital that's well known because they have a big name. It might be miserable there. They're ranked high though, but you may hate your life. Just same with CRNA school. Talk to current students in the program. That is by far the best way to get the insider scoop on how it is, how they are enjoying it in the program. I'm Jenny Finnell, CRNA and founder of CRNA School Prep Academy. I have always had a passion for helping those who aspire to become a CRNA. A couple of years ago, I started mentoring a handful of prospective students. Fast forward to today, and I have a successful mentoring program that has impacted hundreds of aspiring and now current nurse anesthesia students. What I enjoy the most in my business is connecting with you, the future CRNA. I love learning and growing with you. The road to CRNA is full of unique challenges, and no two journeys are the same. But every journey has a learning opportunity. I'm here to share what I have learned over the years from not just my students, but CRNA community leaders, program faculty, and from my time as a practicing CRNA. This will be your one-stop shop to get the mentoring you need to not only guide you into this career path, but support you all the way through to graduation day. So if you're a nursing student who's exploring the possibility, an ICU nurse actively pursuing CRNA, or a current nurse anesthesia student, you're in the right place. Tune in for inspiration and actionable takeaways that will help you from start to finish. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of CRNA School Prep Academy podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Finnell, CRNA, and today we're going to dive into how much does CRNA school cost? What are some things maybe that you haven't thought about? And I'm also going to share some of the most affordable CRNA programs that are out there today. So without further ado, let's get into what are some things to consider when paying for CRNA school. I want to address this first because I often get asked the question by aspiring CRNAs that, will I get a better or higher paying job as a CRNA if I go to a very prestigious CRNA program, one that has a very big name? And really, I hate to burst the bubble, but the answer is no. You will not get paid more just because you go to a college that is prestigious, like Yale, for example. You're not going to make any more money than I do, who went to AK Rowdy. No, it's Akron. I'm from Akron, so they call it AK Rowdy. But it's kind of like the diamond in the rough. Like, no one knows about it because it's just a small little city in the middle of Ohio. But that being said, again, what really plays into how much you can make as a CRNA comes into the location, all right, and your work experience. I mean, how much experience are you bringing to the table? Whether it's a 1099 PRN, W-2, what's the competitive atmosphere of that work environment as far as how many spots are there for one job, how many CRNA schools are in that city, because sometimes the more CRNA schools you get in a city, sometimes the more diluted that job market gets as far as you have more CRNAs being cranked out every year. So a lot of it can kind of play into that. Obviously, cost of living is one of them. But really, the biggest factor as far as landing your dream job, the high-paying dream job after school, is the amount of work you put into school and essentially the long-term job interview that you have as a student, as a resident, as an SRNA in clinical. So that is what really matters most when it comes to getting that dream job after school versus actually picking a school that just has a big name. The other thing I want to point out that I often hear people say, well, that school's not ranked high. Be cautious of those rankings, because I've talked to program faculty about this because it's brought up to me quite often, like, but that school's ranked higher, so I will get more job offers or have a better experience if I go to this school that's ranked really high in the rankings, right? those rankings don't really sometimes mean a whole lot. I mean, I'm not saying they don't. I'm not poo-pooing them completely, but I also know the way they get those rankings could be money, could be prestige of school leadership. So it doesn't necessarily reflect the experience of the student all of the time. So take it for what it's worth. I wouldn't pick a school solely based on it's ranked in the top 10 CRNA schools. I kind of wish they would just do away with that. Talk to current students from the programs, people. Like, that's the best way. Just like when you go to find a job, for example, don't just go to a hospital that's well known because they have a big name. It might be miserable there. They're ranked high though, but you may hate your life. Just same with CRNA school. Talk to current students in the program. That is by far the best way to get the insider scoop on how it is, how they are enjoying it in the program. So that's my piece of advice. I use that advice for myself when I look for jobs as a CRNA. I talk to CRNAs from these environments and make sure that they are happy, that they are getting the experience in work environment they desire. That is always going to be the best indication that you are also going to be happy at that work environment. Take it from me, because I didn't do that one time and I regretted it. And most of the things I share with you on this show, you guys, a lot of times are things that I've made mistakes on too. I mean, I think it's so easy to go for the shiny object or go for something that you think has all the name recognition, right? But it's not always as glorious as you think it is. The grass is not always greener on the other side, like that term. And so is it worth paying $100,000 more for that CRNA program than another CRNA program just because they have name recognition? Personally don't think so. But if it comes backed with good experience from current students and really nurturing effective faculty, 110% pay the extra $100,000 compared to a school that maybe is less expensive, but the students are miserable there. Their rotations are really hot. They're not getting the support they need. I mean, whatever. I mean, I don't know, but unfortunately you're going to kind of find some of the stuff out only by talking to current students and then compare. And what I will also say is, nothing's perfect, right? If you are expecting perfection and 100% everything, you're never going to find it. You're going to always have to have a give and take. Maybe a school is, very great and supportive academically, but maybe those clinical sites that they rotate through are kind of rough. I mean, that's a give and take, right? Really great support academically, but maybe a little more of a brutal experience in clinical, or vice versa. Maybe more brutal experience academically, but maybe the clinicals are just rock solid, amazing, and just you're going to be surrounded by a lot of people who are willing to take you under their wing and help and support you. And so that's a good experience. And what I can say, even just from my own experience, is you're going to kind of get a blend of both. You're never going to have 100% of anything. You're going to get great clinical experiences. You're going to get not so great clinical experiences. You're going to have, academically though, I feel like that should be pretty solid. I mean, I was fortunate to where I feel like I had a good academic experience. Now, that being said, we also went through a program director retiring and got kind of a new staff thrown into the fire with no lecture prepared notes. So it was kind of I felt kind of bad because it wasn't their fault, but they came in pretty much unprepared to teach certain lectures because so that wasn't the greatest experience. Obviously, academically, there was a lot of self-study involved for that. Did it hinder me from graduating, from passing boards? No, absolutely not. Because to a certain extent, when you go into CRNA school, you're an adult learner and you take 100% responsibility for your learning. Now, that being said, I'm not saying it's not up to the CRNA schools to provide you with that support. They do need to do that. But you have to take the initiative when you feel like you need it to speak up and ask for things or to do the extra things that you need for yourself as far as advancing your knowledge, right? So I made sure when they, 2 weeks in the CRNA school, when they said get a board prep, study prep, start prepping for boards, I was like, okay, I'm down. This is the pace you want me to take with that. That was an addition to what we were doing during school. I stuck with it. I followed that and I was very well prepared for boards. Now, had I not done that, I may have felt otherwise, and I know some of my classmates ran into that problem. So again, it's not the school's fault. They'll tell you what you need to be doing, and sometimes some of it is really kind of up to you to do extra behind the scenes. It's not going to be part of your classwork. It's going to be extra on, to do extra board prep on the side, right? But yeah, talk to current students. Is it really worth paying an extra $1,000? Well, it might be, again, if the students are incredibly happy there and they're like, oh my gosh, this is the best experience. The staff and the clinicals and oh my gosh, this is the best program, the simulation labs, everything just I feel so supported. Well, then 100% shell out the extra money. But if you talk to someone, they're like, I don't know. I mean, I'm struggling, this is that, and this is happening. I mean, it's okay. Well, and especially then compare it to the other school who's cheaper, and if that student says the same thing, it's okay. Well, then now you're comparing an apple to an apple. Just pick one. And, if they're both the same as far as the few students you spoke to, well, then just pick the one that's more affordable, in my opinion. But if you speak and you see a very different, and I would speak to more than one student, there are some students who just naturally will be more disgruntled towards their experience than others. You will find that all of the time. You will have some students who are thriving and accelerating, while other students are like, this is the most miserable experience of my life. But those are two different people, two different experiences, two different support systems at home. Don't just think because one person says it's awful. Consider the fact that experience could not just be from the school, could be from whatever they have going on in their home life, Maybe they don't have the support that they really need in their personal life. That does play into it, you guys. So there's a lot of things to consider other than just price. So take that for what it's worth, for what I could share with you, as far as don't just pick a school based on name. You don't get a better paying CRNA job afterwards. What gets you that good paying CRNA job is putting in the work in clinical, showing up with a smile on your face, a good attitude, willing to learn, adapt, seeking out new opportunities. Show that you're there. Don't just watch the clock and just can't wait to get out the door, right? I mean, those are the types of people that if you go into that kind of, if you start embracing clinical like that, people will be able to tell you're checked out. They will know that you're not really there to learn. They will know that you're just there to get the experience and check a box and graduate and get on with your life. Like, they won't see that you're really vested in wanting to work there afterwards. And I'm not saying only be a go-getter on the clinical sites that you want to work at. You should really do that for all your clinical sites, because another thing that can happen is word of mouth, you guys. CRNAs, it's a small, tight-knit community. I feel like everyone knows everyone to some extent. And you can also, as equally as it is amazing and empowering to kind of be embraced and supported by the community, you can equally kind of build a bad reputation pretty quickly if, you don't cognizant of, what you're doing and the choices you're making and what you're saying and how you're treating others. So that being said, like when you go to take a CRNA job, one of the first things that will happen is that chief CRNA will come to the employees that are already working there and say, hey, who knows so-and-so? Anyone know anyone that knows this person that you can speak to them, and should we hire them? I'm not joking you. And then like for students who are rotating clinically, you better believe that if you go the extra mile and you're that student who always wants to learn, adapt, and you show up with a really great attitude, you'll be begged to come work there. Like, they'll be like, please, like we have a student like that right now who they're like, oh my gosh, we have to recruit her. We have to get her in. She's amazing. She's so enjoyable to work with. She's on it, like that kind of thing. I mean, people, they will recruit you because, again, that's how small, tight-knit this community is. And so just take that for what it's worth. Know that the time in clinical and the effort you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. And that's really how you really land the high-paying CRNA positions. All right, so let's go more into the expense of CRNA school, just to kind of give you guys some ballpark figures. Now, keep in mind, some of these figures are incredibly low, but it's also because it's in Puerto Rico. So I also want to point out that I found this out. I didn't know this, but when you train in Puerto Rico, you can actually stay in Puerto Rico and practice without ever passing boards, which is why when you look at like the board passing rates of these programs in Puerto Rico, they're incredibly low, like 50% sometimes. You're like, whoa, how are they staying open? And it's because Puerto Rico, you can actually practice as a CRNA without ever taking boards in Puerto Rico. Like, once you finish and you graduate, you can practice there, but you won't be board certified, meaning you can't come to the mainland and practice here without first taking boards. So if you're wondering, well, what the heck's going on? How are these programs staying open? That's why, because I had to ask the same questions where I was like, what is going on? I didn't know that. But they're also going to be the most affordable. So again, if you can speak fluent Spanish and you're willing to travel over there for 3 years to get your education, you can take boards and come back here and practice as a CRNA and save a ton of money because, let's see, University of Puerto Rico, for example, is $16,000. Let's see if $16,000. I mean, I'm sure, and even out of state, $18,000. I mean, that's you're not going to be able to beat that. Obviously, there's costs of relocating and things like that, but a lot of people relocate for CRNA school. So again, I do know, you should be able to speak Spanish. Relatively understand it. I do know they teach in English and things like that. So I don't think that should be a huge barrier, but your patient population that you will be caring for will be heavily Spanish speaking. So keep that in mind if you were to pick that. I'm sure that they probably do some type of screen for that as well when they interview. But from what I've been told by students cause I thought maybe you had to be able to learn in Spanish. That's not the case. Because that's what I originally thought. And I had a student correct me. And they're like, no, you don't have to learn in Spanish. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, that makes it a little bit easier then. So that by far is going to be the cheapest route to become a CRNA as far as CRNA school expense. The next one that is very low, and it's in the States, or, on the mainland States, is $25,000. And is that right? Gosh, let me make sure I'm scrolling over. $25,000, and that's the southern Mississippi. Is that affordable? And that's in Hattiesburg. So there you go. If you're willing to travel there. Let's see, the next one, I'm gonna go down just a few of them. I'm not gonna go through all of them because there's so many. In fact, you guys, I have a resource that you can download in the show notes below that covers, I have it pulled open right now. I think it goes over 11 schools that are under $60,000, and then there are CRNA schools that are under $100,000, which are 50. There's 50 CRNA schools that are under $100,000, and there are 11 CRNA programs that are under $60,000. Just to put numbers on it. And again, I have that resource listed below. So other than Mississippi, we have $26,000, and that is that's also in Puerto Rico. So you also have to watch for in-state and out-of-state tuition. In-state tuition could be $50,000, but out-of-state could be $123,000. So keep that in mind. There could be a pretty big jump. This school that I'm talking about that is a total of $50,000 is UNCG in North Carolina, Greensboro. And then Florida Gulf Coast is $41,000. In-state, out-of-state, $140,000. So in order to get in-state tuition, you usually have to be a resident for usually a year before you qualify for in-state tuition. So again, if you're traveling, for example, and you're trying to seek out what CRNA schools to apply to, maybe obviously look at prices of CRNA programs if that's a big thing for you, right? If that's a big determining factor of where you're going to apply to school. And then plan your assignments as such, right? Maybe, plan on traveling in Florida for, a year, but maybe get a permanent place of residence prior to applying for school and stay there for school. Travel in Florida and then settle in Florida and then go to school in Florida for in-state tuition. So it definitely is going to take some planning. Like I said, if this is your goal is to try to find the most affordable school, you really want to try for in-state tuition if possible, which means you need to be moving there probably at least a year. Some states are longer than that, you guys. So again, you're going to have to research this prior to even probably starting in ICU. Especially if you're looking to get into CRNA school in 1 to 2 years, you need to be planning this out like years ahead of time. So I hope this catches you in time, this podcast episode. All right, so those are just some examples, but again, get the resource that I shared below. But those are some of the most affordable ones. Like I said, you're looking at Puerto Rico, by far the most affordable, which you're looking at like probably $20,000 or less to go to Puerto Rico, and then on the mainland you're looking at $40,000 to $50,000 is like incredibly affordable. And then the average or not average. You're going to find more schools in the $60,000 range. I'm just letting you know, like you're going to find more schools that are in the $60,000 to $80,000 range that are still very affordable. But to find schools under $60,000, you're only talking 11 schools total in the entire CRNA world. So it's not super common. Now, when I went to school, you're not going to like this. My total tuition was like $40,000. Now that was a master's degree, and my program I went to is still one of the most affordable CRNA programs. In fact, it made it didn't make the list. Or no, No, it made the list of under $60,000, which is only 11 schools, and that's the University of Akron. It's always been very affordable. So anyways, now it's $56,000. It was $40,000 when I went 8 years ago. Things have inflation. Inflation's crazy. And the fact that it became a D&P added to the expense. All the schools, you guys, when it became D&P, it added to all of the schools' expense. It's one more additional year, nine additional months of college credits that you're taking. So that's the reason for the steep price increase. So yeah, make sure you grab that resource. Okay, so I've just told you some of the most affordable ones. Now, brace yourself for what's coming, some of the more expensive ones. And it's funny because when I applied, cost obviously it was a concern, but it wasn't my main priority for picking a school. In fact, the original program I interviewed for and applied to was pretty much almost twice as expensive as the school I ended up going to. I would have went. If I had been accepted, I wouldn't have turned it down. I probably still would have interviewed at the University of Akron in hopes that I also got an acceptance. And if that was the case, I probably would have forfeited my money that I paid for the original school and went to Akron instead. Because I still would have saved a ton more money, given, usually the deposit's like $1,000 or something like that, where, the tuition difference is 20, 30 grand. So that being said, the most expensive CRNA schools that are out there, and again, I want to say like the average these days for what it's going to cost to go to CRNA school is you're looking at right around, $90,000 to $80,000. I would say is probably like the middle of the road average. And like I said, we have 50 schools that are 100,000 or less. Okay. Or under 100,000, I should say. 50 schools that are under 100,000. So that's quite a bit. And there's 127 approximately, give or take every year, add or minus some. So 40 some percent of schools that are under $100,000. So you're looking at, the rest of them being over $100,000 for tuition. But the most expensive is like over $200,000 is the most expensive. Now that is eek. That's really expensive. Now I have had students who are like, oh my gosh, Jenny, this is where I got accepted. I'm freaking out about how expensive it is. I have 4 kids and I'm not going to work and I have, I got to support the family. What am I going to do? We're never going to unbury ourselves from all this debt. Just take a deep breath, deep breath before, but this is why I think you need to be thinking about these things well in advance of applying to CRNA school, and you need to be planning for that and understanding that if you were to spend X, Y, and Z amount of money to go to CRNA school, what is the return on investment? Okay, the ROI. You have to understand the return on investment. You have to know what it's going to increase your yearly earnings and what that looks like on the table. Not just on your tax return, but what kind of money are you going to be taking from the table? What are you going to be bringing home after medical expenses, saving for college and retirement, all that jazz? What is it that you're going to end up in your hand with once you become a CRNA? And that's the money then that you have to put towards your debt. And then how much do you need to live on comfortably every single month? And then do the math and kind of figure out, am I going to be able to live comfortably and increase my quality of life after CRNA school, even if I take on $300,000 of debt? Kind of where I see struggle arise, and this is just from me observing coworkers, okay, are people who tend to have over 100% debt to income ratio. So what does that mean? It means if you're making $200,000 a year as a CRNA, if you have $250,000+ of student loans, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. Does it mean you're not going to live well? Absolutely not. You're going to live just fine. But you're going to have to make an effort to make sure that you're not going out and buying a Mercedes-Benz and buying a $500,000 home, right? You're going to have to live modestly until you pay off some of that debt, refinance and set up for a 5-year repayment, and then see what your monthly payments are, and then adjust your living accordingly, right? Unfortunately, if you're going to be taking on that kind of debt after CRNA school, you may have to wait to kind of really get a big kind of fun money boost that you really desire after CRNA school. But that could be done in 5 years, meaning if you set up for a 5-year repayment, get the lowest interest rate possible, and kind of make some sacrifices as far as you can't get the house of your dreams yet, you can't get your dream car yet, or whatever your dream is after CRNA school, but still enjoy your life, still take family vacations, take time off, enjoy your career, but pay off your debt. And then the reward's going to be now you're debt free, and now you have a surplus of $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month of extra income that now you can really like do some fun things with that, right? So I think it's just a matter of understanding what your needs are month to month and knowing what your ultimate goals are as far as when do you want to retire, how many more working years you have left, what's a realistic time frame to refinance. They have all kinds of refinance calculators online where you can plug and play numbers and play with interest rates and all of that to kind of see if I have $300,000 of student loan debt at 6% interest and I paid off over 7 years, what are my monthly payments going to be? Plug and play with the numbers, see what feels good, and then gauge, okay, and I know in my area, CRNAs start off making $100 an hour, which is approximately $200,000 a year. My take home maybe would be $10,000 or $11,000 a month. If I have $3,000 a month in student loan payments, that only leaves me with, $7,000, $8,000 a month of actual income. Is that going to be enough, right? So work out the numbers. And I mean, chances are as an RN, you're probably only bringing in, maybe $5,000 or $6,000 a month, maybe $7,000. So if you're bringing in $8,000 a month as a CRNA after paying $3,000 a month in student loans, you still would increase your overall monthly earnings. And then you can work tons of overtime. Wink, wink, FYI. But that being said, yeah, it's not going to feel like a giant woohoo, I'm making like $4,000 more a month because you're now paying off your student loans, right, over the next 5 to 6 years. But you can also work overtime to really knock that off much quicker. I did 24-hour shifts when I first started or first graduated. And that allowed me to do like a 16 and a 24. That freed up more time for me to pick up 8 hours of overtime. And sometimes I would pick up 24 hours overtime on the weekend. And that really paid well. That was a W-2 position that paid $135 an hour. I'm sure it's more now. I'm sure it's more like $145 an hour to work on the weekends at that hospital because everything's gone up since then. But that really helped me knock off a lot of my debt pretty quickly. Like my first year out, I paid off $80,000 without even knowing it. Like I was like, oh my gosh. When we didn't have kids, we rented a house. I drove my 13-year-old car. And if you've listened to some of my stories in the past, I always worry. People are like, oh, Jenny, you tell the story all the time. But I didn't get a new car until we were pregnant with our first child and we had a snowstorm. And I went to open it was a Nissan Sentra is what I was driving, a 13-year-old Nissan Sentra. I called her Betty. Her name was Old Betty. She was reliable little Betty until the door handle broke off because it got frozen shut. We live in Ohio. It froze shut. I was yanking the door open. It was frozen with we didn't have a garage at this rental that we were renting, or if we did, I don't remember. I don't remember having a garage. Either way, it was outside. And the freaking door handle popped off. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So here I am going to work because we're a level 1 trauma and we don't close for a giant snowstorm. I had to crawl in through my passenger door like 4 months pregnant. And at that point I was like, oh, I'm getting a new car. We're gonna have a baby. We're getting a new car. And I still have that car that I got back after that snowstorm. It's a 2016 Honda Pilot and I love it. It still feels nice and new to me. But yeah, so, we live really, really modestly. We didn't live on much in school. And so when we were done with school, we took a nice trip to Whistler. We went on a ski trip, but we didn't buy a house right away. We rented a place for like $1,000 a month. It was a real small home. We just had me and my husband and my dog, and we did that. And then when we got pregnant, then we got a house and I got a car, and then we had daycare. And before you know it, I had actually stopped paying on all my student loans for over a year. Well, I mean, I paid the minimums, right? But I kind of made the mistake where I didn't refinance right away. I just was paying all this extra that it was going pretty quick. And then I got busy, we got a house, we got more expenses, and I kind of just started forgetting to pay extra. And I realized, holy snikes, I'm not going to pay this debt off until I'm like, our kids are in college at this rate, because I'm just letting it barely pay the minimums, which I had set up for like a 30-year repayment, which was a huge mistake. Don't do that. You want to get it paid off before your kids are in college. So at that time I refinanced, set up on a 5-year repayment plan, and I just paid them off. My loans are gone now. I've been out for 8 years. I paid them off technically officially in June of this year. But again, that was with me. We didn't have to sacrifice a whole lot. My payments were like $1,100 a month at minimum, but I was paying more like $1,800 a month on them just to get them paid off a little bit quicker. So instead of 5 years, I paid them off in like a little over 4 years instead of full 5. Because again, I was paying extra. And again, we live very comfortably with that. with my W-2 CRNA salary and working full time. I would say, I'm just sharing numbers with you guys. When I was working full time, 36 hours a week, 40 hours a week as a CRNA, I was bringing home, anywhere from $9,000 to $10,000 after everything, medical, taxes, all that. Paying a couple $1,000s a month didn't really feel like, a giant burden. My husband also worked and was bringing in some money. I will tell you though, daycare is so expensive. Holy shnikes. Daycare is more than our mortgage. Yeah. Yikes. So kids are expensive. They're amazing. I love babies and I love kids, but they're quite expensive. I can see why people quit their jobs and stay home instead of work, because why would I work to pay daycare? So that's just to share a little bit of background on my experience and kind of paying off debt. I hope that it helps alleviate your fears a little bit. Now, if you're but I'm going to have over 100% debt to income ratio, and this is where I've said I've seen some of my coworkers struggle a little bit. I also equally know there are some people who can't resist the urge to get nice cars and buy nice houses and all those things, right? And get their nails done and, all the things, right? All the things. And so I think their monthly expenses are quite high. I don't buy I probably buy new clothes once a year. I don't spend a lot of money. I went an entire year without ever doing my hair. I had a lot of roots at that time, but I'm not someone who routinely spends tons of money on getting my nails done. I have long nails, but I never do them. They never get them done or anything like that. Again, I don't spend money on stuff like that. So again, I think it just depends on, you have to know yourself and know what you want. And, you're going to go get, your, what do they call it when you get your eyebrows done? I don't remember. They glue them up to the ceilings these days. And those are called something. It's you perm your eyebrows, if you have, but if that's something that you need for self-care, put it in your budget and then kind of work the numbers and figure out what it is you need to feel comfortable and fulfilled. So that's really what it's all about at the end of the day, is kind of running the numbers and knowing where your comfort level is. And also gauging, if you have a spouse and what they're bringing in. So, again, if you're going to have $3,000 a month minimum loan payment for 7 years, and now you're only bringing home $7,000 a month, is that going to be enough? Or do you need a 10-year repayment plan? Maybe that would drop it to more $2,500 a month or something. I don't know. Again, you gotta just kind of figure out what works. I do know the vast majority of new CRNAs just work a ton of overtime to pay off their loans, but you gotta be careful with that too, because hello, burnout city. Think about being burnt out in CRNA school. And then you graduate and you work 50, 60. I just saw one of CSB's old students who just graduated, not old students, say that, she's not old, but she's one of the original OGs, right? One of the original ones who was in part of CRNA School Prep Academy. She's working 100 hours. I'm what are you doing, girl? I get it, you guys. You're woo, I'm done. I got to pay off my debt. And I did it too. So I'm not criticizing. If that's what you do, just be mindful of what you need. I also I didn't go nearly that crazy for an extended period of time. I probably worked, consistently 55-ish hours. I don't know what ended up, 60 hours maybe. I never did much more than that though, because I'm nope. I like my free time. I like going to the gym. I like having some me time. And then the reality is too, if you have kids, it might not even be possible for you to work that kind of overtime. Because you have responsibilities at home. So just be mindful of that, and don't burn yourself into the ground. You don't want to graduate with your brand new glorious career only to find yourself miserable because you're working like a dog. It's just money. It'll be okay. Just live your life. Be responsible, obviously, but just be understanding and realistic with what it's going to take to pay off your debt. But yeah, so as far as expense for CRNA school, just tuition alone, you can plan on $100,000, let's just say, and then living expenses. This is the other thing too. If you're not working, now I do know, me, I worked for the first 3 months of the program. I didn't last long, but then I was also in I was in an integrated program, and I started clinical relatively quickly. And I was in a master's degree, so we didn't have all the D&P work. I do know a lot of students managed to keep a full-time position, or at least close to full-time, for the first 9 months of their program to do the D&P work. But that being said, I decided I was only working 1 day a week, and it was not worth my stress. It was just pennies. I was making $22, $24 an hour. It was barely paying money for food for the week. So I was like, this is just not even worth it. So I quickly quit and was happy to do so. So just be realistic with your time in school. You got to pass. You don't want to start school and then not pass because you're working and then have debt and no degree. So keep that in mind. And you need to anticipate taking out loans to cover your living expenses. Like, so for us, I'll just share my example because this is what I know. I was making about $22, $24 an hour. So that's approximately $55,000 a year as a nurse. At the time, my husband was making, poor thing, his first job out of college was selling door-to-door insurance. So that didn't go so well, poor thing. It was a good experience. But I want to remember my poor husband, I remember him crying. He was like, I made $11,000 in 1 year. Like, yeah, after a college degree. So that was eye-opening. But at the time, I want to say he was working for, is it Caster Connection? Yeah. So I want to say he was making, I don't know, was that job like maybe $30,000 or $40,000 a year approximately is what he was making. So that's really all we had to live on for two people was about $40,000 a year. So if it was one person's income, that's $20,000 a year. We had to cut back. Like, we had to live very, I luckily found a coworker of mine who rented her apartment. It was a nice condo. She rented that to us for relatively pretty cheap. Again, we both drove old cars. My car was paid off. My husband's car, I think we still were paying like $200 a month on it. It was a relatively affordable car. We didn't go out to eat. I coupon like crazy. I was a big couponer, man. I probably spent 20 minutes or more a week just couponing, but I saved hundreds of dollars every month from couponing. I always brought my coffee from my coffee pot, no Starbucks. We only went out to dinner for like birthdays or holidays, or, if my parents or his parents took us out to eat, we'd go out to eat, because we weren't paying the bill. So we just did what we could. We cut out cable. We found ways to look at things. We kept our gym membership. We kept things that mattered to us, right? We kept things that we knew we needed for our own sanity. I even gardened. I spent money on seeds and grew stuff from seeds. Because gardening's I love gardening. It's a therapy for me. I love watching things grow. So I still gardened a little bit intermittently in school. But for the most part, like I said, our dog ended up being kind of an expense because he was a sickly dog, had immune issues. So we just had to budget for what we needed every month, but we didn't have but then there's some of you who are not going to have any support. I was very incredibly grateful I had my husband making any money while we were in school. What he made was enough to pay our monthly rent and some utilities and some groceries, but we had to take out the rest of our monthly living expenses, which again, I had to write down and budget out and know exactly what they were. I then had to also budget for the unexpected. Like when I had my car broke down once during school, our dog got sick in school. We had tons of vet bills. I ended up actually being asked to be a maid of honor in a wedding that was in Baltimore, which ended up being an expense, right? We took a trip to Puerto Rico, which we had planned for. So, and it was kind of like off the beaten path, Puerto Rico. When we got there, we went to drive, which was an experience. And there was a horse that came down the road. We're like, whoa, there's a horse in the road. We almost hit a horse in Puerto Rico. Anyways, but we did that, in school. So again, we budgeted for all of this stuff before I even started school. And so just knowing your numbers is huge. So I can't stress that enough. But I was able to take out loans. I took out all the extra loans I could get. I also made sure I had all my credit cards paid off prior to starting school. And I worked a lot of overtime as a nurse to not only pay off our wedding, because we got married and it was expensive, and we paid for it. But I also worked to try to save up as much as I could to have extra and made sure my credit cards were not carrying balances when I started school. This also allowed me to get 0% interest credit cards, to charge them up and not have to worry about paying off the balance. I utilized that towards the end of school. I would open up a card or do a balance transfer, for example, on a credit card and take 18 months to have 0% interest-free payments on that credit card. That's how, when we graduated in August, we were broke. Like we had no money and we needed money. And we wanted to take a whitewater rafting trip. So we needed the money. No, we really did need the money for other things, but we want to take a real basic. I used my parents had a timeshare. So we used that to stay, and then we drove there. So it was dirt cheap. It was a $300 trip total. That was it. But we did do that. But I took out $10,000 on a credit card for 0%. for 12 months, and that got us through to when I got my first paycheck in October. Because again, graduated in August, started my job, got my first paycheck at the end of October. So we had several months where I was out of school, but we had no money coming in other than my husband's job. So have good credit. It can really help you through those hard times. And again, if you're paying a balance transfer fee of 3%, that's like practically free money. I mean, that's how good some of these offers are. You can get transfer fees for 3%. I mean, that's really not much considering what you would then pay even for a private loan. The interest rates are usually well over 3% for a private loan these days. So if you have good credit, you can get opportunities like that. So I hope you guys found this episode helpful, and hope it got your wheels turning on how you're going to budget for CRNA school, and maybe when you're looking for CRNA programs, what's the price range you can look for. I have a lot of students worry they're not going to get extra loans to support them personally. You can always amend, or I don't know if that's the right term. Amend? I don't know if that's the right word. I can't think of the right word, but you can essentially fight. You can rebuttal. You can essentially, if the loans you apply for don't come back and say we're only going to give you this, but you need this, you can actually get a spreadsheet of all your expenses and your bills, get all your bills together and say, no, I need this much. This is how much my daycare costs. This is how much our mortgage, blah, 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 blah. I need this much money from you as a private loan or a government loan, and they will then give you that money. But you have to prove that you need it. They don't just give out money to give out money because you want it. And it's just a safety issue. But from what I've been told from students who have had to do this method, it's not hard. I mean, it's a process, but it's not like you're going to get denied, right? You just have to have proof. One of the things I dealt with in school financially that I was kind of like, ugh, it was my loans coming out of deferment. I had deferred my loans in school, which that's a story for another day. I ended up owing like over 110% on some of my undergrad loans, which made me like sick to my stomach. 3 years of paying on my undergrad loans only to owe 110% after grad school. Yeah, that was upsetting. But needless to say, when I deferred my student loans, there was a quarter or a semester, whatever it was, that I dropped below technically full-time as a student because we were in clinical, right? We were all this time in clinical, but the loan companies don't know that, and they saw that and they put me into a repayment. I'm like, no, you can't do this. Like, I can't afford that. I'm actually still a full-time student, and I actually had to get a letter from my program director stating as such. And then they reversed it. They fixed it for me, but it was stressful at the moment. So I'm like, no, I can't pay this bill. But it was dealt with. And did it cause some extra stress? Sure, but it was fine. Then once I knew that every semester that I was under, I think it was like 12 credit hours or something like that, I had to then submit additional documentation to my loan companies that I was still technically considered a full-time student, resident, whatever. So you just got to navigate it. You just got to figure it out. You'll be okay. But yeah, hopefully this was eye-opening for you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you next week. All right, bye-bye. Take care. Hey, future CRNA, as always, I appreciate you and your loyalty. Thank you so very much for tuning in this week. I'd love to hear from you, so screenshot this episode and share it to your IG stories with your biggest takeaway. Don't forget to tag me at CRNA School Prep Academy so I can personally thank you. Be sure to head over to CRNASchoolPrepAcademy.com to check out our blog and gather free resources to help you along your CRNA journey. Stay strong, and I'll see you next week.